central bank has intervened in foreign exchange markets to prevent that process from happening. What is the consequence of that? The consequence is that companies that export benefit, right? Companies that import lose. And I would say even more importantly, it's the Taiwanese workers that lose from this policy. So it's companies like TSMC that gain, and it's the workers that lose from the exchange. So it's one of the reasons for why wages in Taiwan, despite how well the economy has done, is low.
观众朋友您好，欢迎收看《工商时报财经相对论》，我是节目主持人朱楚文。在上一集节目当中呢，我们特别为各位邀请到来自芝加哥大学布商学院的特聘教授，同时也是台湾中研院的院士谢长泰院士，来跟我们谈谈川普的关税政策对于台湾的影响以及呢，这真的能够救美国吗？那谢院士给了我们很不一样的观点。那接下来呢，这下半集我们要更深入来谈谈最近呢，川普的这个关税政策引发的还有新台币升值的这个问题，那也引发了整个亚洲的货币的一些震荡那谢院士怎么看这个货币未来的发展呢？那我们再一次的来欢迎谢院士。Hello, welcome again, Dr. Xie.
Yes, thanks for having me back.
Speaking of exchange rates, we've seen that the NT dollars has jumped more than 10% since April and has cooled a little bit recently. But we're curious about that. What's your view on the future trend of the NT dollars? Will they stay strong in the future because of Trump's tariff policy?
I don't think it necessarily has much to do with Trump's tariff policy. So let me give you the perspective that there is no question that the NT dollar is much too weak, even now, right? With the and the way to think about it is that what happens in a well-functioning economy is that when your exports goes up because your companies are doing better, you discover a new technology, so things are going well, right? Your exports go up, right? As it should, right? Because more customers want your products. What should happen, and this is what happens in almost every country in the world, is that your currency then goes up in value, and then the consequence of that is that you start to buy more. It's a little bit like thinking of asking yourself, suppose that you get a new job and your salary goes up 3 times, right? What do? Well, your salary goes up by 3 times. You move into a nicer apartment, you buy a new car, you go on a nice vacation. So your spending goes up. That is the natural response, and that is the response in which you actually get to enjoy the benefits of the fact that your income has gone up. Okay, in Taiwan, and it's one of the few countries in which that has not happened. That the exports have gone up and they've gone up and they have gone up, but imports have not gone up, and the reason it hasn't gone up, it's because there is a lot of evidence that what's happened is that the central bank has intervened in foreign exchange markets to prevent that process from happening. What is the consequence of that? The consequence is that companies that export benefit, right? Companies that import lose. And I want to say that this comes to one of the comments that was made earlier, that the majority of companies in Taiwan, they don't export. The majority of companies only serve the domestic market. The majority of jobs in Taiwan are not in exports. The majority of jobs in Taiwan are in companies that serve only the domestic market. For example, the studio here, it primarily serves the customers. The viewers are primarily in the domestic market. So it's the domestic companies that suffer because it's the export companies that gain. And I would say even more importantly, it's the Taiwanese workers that lose from this policy. So it's companies like TSMC that gain, and it's the workers that lose from the exchange. So it's one of the reasons for why wages in Taiwan, despite how well the economy has done, is low. Now, to finally answer your question of what is going to happen, I think that and so let me just say, the consequence of this policy is that Taiwan has the largest trade surplus of any country in the world. Last year, Taiwan's surplus reached 15% of GDP. This year, it's probably going to go to more than 20% of GDP. China, which everybody has been talking about, has run large surpluses. It's at 3% of GDP. So Taiwan is really an outlier in this. And really the only solution, the inevitable market solution, is that the exchange rate needs to go up in value, right? And when the exchange rate go up in value, yes, the exporting companies are going to have to pay more, but the importing companies or everybody else is going to gain. And more importantly, the wages of Taiwanese workers will go up because the stuff that you're importing is going to become cheaper. So I think that there is a complication, though, which is that in the case of Taiwan, it has painted itself in a corner because of what an appreciation is going to do to the financial system. And that, I think, is the other big risk here, which is that one of the biggest actors in Taiwan's financial system is the life insurance industry, right? What has happened is that their assets have gone up tremendously. And the problem that they face is that, so maybe the way to think about a life insurance company is that it's essentially a bank. Like they collect money. So think about what a bank does. They collect money from you in exchange for a promise that when you want the money, they will give you your money back, right? That's a bank. What a life insurance company does is that it collects payments from you in exchange for a promise that when you die, the money will go to your family or will go. So it effectively serves the purpose of the bank, right? The question is, what do you do? What does the financial institution do with the money? The bank, you think that it's going to take the money and it's going to loan it out to companies. It's going to loan it out to people that want to buy a house. What life insurance companies have done is that they've taken your money and they've basically bought mostly US Treasury bonds. So the money they have, right, is denominated in US dollars, okay? Their promises to you is in Taiwan dollars, right? Now think about what's going to happen if the NT dollar goes up in value, okay? Their promises to you are in NT dollars. What they have are US dollars. So what they have now, relative to what they've promised to you, goes down. So what we've seen is that the 10% appreciation of the NT dollar in the last 2 months has brought it to the point of financial insolvency. Another 10% appreciation, they're going to go bankrupt. And they're so big, there's so much money there that it's a real risk that if they go under, then the whole system is going to collapse. So that, I think, is the major obstacle to, I think, an adjustment that Taiwan really needs, right? Because if you think about where it's going, this year exports are booming because of the AI boom, right? The exchange rate, even with the appreciation of the NT dollar, it's not been enough. It's not been enough. So the surplus is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And at some point, sort of the pressure from the markets is going to be much too large. So think about what we saw in those 3 days in March, or no, it was in April, right? It was the 3 days in April. Think about those forces, right? Think about those forces, and the dam is going to burst. And unless you handle it properly, it's going to be a financial disaster. So that is the other big risk, right? The other birds, and that has nothing to do with Trump. It's nothing to do with tariffs. It's just about financial mismanagement in Taiwan.
Okay. How should the government in Taiwan to respond? What's your suggestion?
That's a complicated question. And then the question is, how do you define the government? Like, is it the executive yen? Is it the executive yen? Because when you talk with the executive yen, they will say that, well, this is not our issue because it's the central bank's policy, and, and the central bank is independent. Right?
Okay.
Nominally.
So what's your suggestion for central bank in Taiwan?
It's basically two bodies that matter, right? It's not the executive yen, it's a central bank plus the financial stability board, right? The financial regulators. So collectively, I think that it's a combination of two things, that the central bank needs to make clear that the policy of the last 15 years of intervening in foreign exchange markets to keep the Taiwan dollar cheap is over, and they should make clear what the long-run goal is. That the long-run goal is to let market forces determine the exchange rate in the long run, but still maintaining the flexibility to intervene to deal with any temporary instability. At the same time, if that was the only thing that was going on, then the life insurance companies are going to go bankrupt. At the same time, the financial stability, I think it's called the FSC, right? The financial state. They basically need to get the life insurance companies to begin to recapitalize. That is, they need to put the owners of those companies, because they've essentially lost money, right? And given what's going to happen, they're going to lose even more money. So to prevent the whole system from collapsing, they have to bring in more capital into the system. So it's really a combination of actions by these two bodies.
And we've seen some East Asian countries manage their exchange rate to keep export competitive too, just as Taiwan. So we're curious about that. If countries stop doing this and let the market be, what would actually happen to their country economy?
I don't think that it's true that every country has done it. I mean, one way to see it, right, is to look at what is the surplus of each country, right?
How about Japan and South Korea? They did it too.
Japan has a surplus of 1%. Korea has a surplus of 2%, which is it's not 20.
Okay.
So what Taiwan has done is really extraordinary. It's not just 20 now, but for the past 15 years, it's been above 10. So it is really just, I want to say that Taiwan is really an extreme outlier in terms of this behavior, right? And I would say that intervention in foreign exchange markets is good if you do it temporarily in response to financial market instability. If you do it in the long run, right, if that is the long run policy, then that ultimately, I think, is very distortionary and is very bad for the country. It lowers wages and it creates these huge imbalances. I mean, that's sort of where Taiwan is now, that it's had this misguided policy for 15, 20 years. So we are stuck with a situation where we have these huge imbalances that are very difficult to deal with. And again, this is just Taiwan's doing, right? It has nothing to do with tariffs, nothing to do with Trump. It's just Taiwan policy.
Okay, so Taiwan has to change, right? From your perspective?
It is going to change. The question is whether the change is forced upon you. And it's something that we have seen throughout history. This is essentially what happened in 1998 to Korea, Malaysia, and Thailand. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to make the change. The market forced it on them. So the question is whether Taiwan does it in a way that minimizes the damage, or the markets will do it for you. And you're not going to like it when the markets do it for you.
So do you think that we have to take action as soon as possible, or just let the market be?
I think that right now, if it wasn't for the life insurance industry, I would say just let the markets operate. But the fact that there's this life insurance industry that is going to come down, I don't think it's a wise course of action to only let the markets operate. So you have got to essentially manage the markets here, right? Because otherwise you're going to have a financial meltdown, and it's not going to be pretty. if that happens.
So we have to adjust our mind to think about export mainly, not export as good and import as bad. We have to change this viewpoint, right?
I would say it's really just asking the question, what is economic policy for, right? The economic policy should be about raising standards of living for the Taiwanese people. What is standards of living? It's your wage and what you can buy with your wage, right? That should be the goal, to improve the livelihoods of the Taiwanese, not to make TSMC richer, right?
Okay. And the last questions, we would like to discuss about the U.S. national debt problem. Okay, the U.S. national debt is now over 33 trillion, and that's a big concern for Trump. But according to modern monetary theory, it says that debt is not really a problem if the government spends money wisely. Do you buy into this idea?
I think that nobody is talking about that now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, nobody's talking about MMT. I would say that MMT never was a serious thing, right? It was just a justification for running deficits forever. And I would say that it is a serious concern. It's a real concern about how much debt the U.S. have. If the U.S. was a normal country, the country would have come down already. Like any other country in the world with the amount of debt that the U.S. have, the currency would crash, the financial system would crash. The U.S. has gotten away with it because people have, like the Taiwanese, have been happy to keep on buying U.S. debt. But we're starting to see signs that is changing. Like the markets are no longer willing to keep on buying debt because of the fear that eventually there's going to be a default. That, I think, is a real problem on the U.S. side. And it's also a real problem for all the other holders of American debt, like the life insurance companies or the central bank, which also holds a lot of American debt in Taiwan, right? Yeah, so that's an issue for American policy. Obviously, Taiwan has no influence over American policy. So in terms of your financial decisions, the question for you is, where do you invest your money in? And probably the wisest thing is not U.S. debt right now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shea.
Yes.
Thank you for your wonderful perspective. 非常谢谢谢院士带给我们很精辟的见解哦，带我们看到这个重新去思考新台币升值背后的意义，以及对于美债的看法。那也欢迎各位可以表达您的看法，在留言区，您的每一则留言我们都会看。那如果喜欢我们的节目，也别忘了按赞、订阅、分享和开启小铃铛。谢谢您收看这一集的《工商时报财经相对论》，我是主持人楚文，我们下次再会喽，拜拜。